Hey guys, so quick note before we get started. My camera during travel was, let's call it misplaced before I go off. So I apologize for this format. I don't have a mic, blah, blah, blah. This is just my phone. That'll be fixed. So we have some more things to discuss re Epstein. This is going to be an interesting conversation because it kind of touches on the politics surrounding Epstein, which I have an issue with for a lot of reasons, a lot of which I've already screamed about, some of which I will scream about in a second. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Accuser says roller coaster of Epstein files saga is a real weight on victims. One of Jeffrey Epstein's accusers and a key witness in his associate Ghislaine Maxwell's sex trafficking trial is calling for the government to release information related to him, especially if there is nothing to hide. Annie Farmer has watched US President Donald Trump's recent handling of the case and the ensuing backlash from the MAGA movement, she said, with exhaustion. She says the case has been politicized and too much focus has been paid to the abusers, with little new information emerging, leaving her feeling used, she told the BBC during an interview on Monday. There are people who have used this to their advantage and tried to focus on elements of it that are sensational, she said. But that doesn't mean there weren't real crimes committed, Ms. Farmer said. Those victims are people with feelings that are trying to live their everyday lives, and this can feel like a real weight falling on us. Ms. Farmer and her sister Maria made the earliest known reports of abuse by Epstein to the NYPD and FBI in, and listen up, 1996. Maria Farmer is currently suing the federal government, accusing it of negligence and failing to protect victims. Over the decades, Annie Farmer said her only sense of justice came from the conviction of Maxwell, Epstein's accomplice. She remains very skeptical of the Trump administration's handling of the case, turning away from promises to release more information on the case, then saying there were no files to release, then seeking to make public-related grand jury testimony. All right, so there is a lot to unpack here. I do think that this is the exact right time for victims to be speaking up. Now, granted, it's always the exact right time, but I feel like when we're coming to a point like we are now, where there's a list, there's no list, we're going to release it, there's no list to release. This back and forth is so detrimental to the case, but also obviously detrimental to the victims who went through God knows what. And basically, I'm not saying they're being erased, but really, some might say it is kind of parallel to saying there's no list, so nothing happened, case closed, goodbye. That's it. So I think this is really the time for the victims and advocates generally to speak up and say, hey, no, there's still all these people who didn't really get any justice. I mean, if you want to count Ghislaine Maxwell, sure, but the main perpetrator here is Epstein, right? So to kind of just say there's no list and anyone who endured anything, well, that's a you problem. Aside from that, we also have to count the fact that this was brought to legal attention, let us say, in 1996. And I think that's really where I had to pause for a minute when I originally read this article, because 96, granted, is only 3 years after I was born, which is crazy because I'm not that young. So it's been a while. But also, what made you linger in the first place? Why was this not looked into immediately? Now, granted, the police, legal bureaus of sorts, I'm sure we know, they have plenty of things to do. They're busy. At the same time, had there been any type of investigation, I'm not even saying a deep, thorough one, I'm pretty sure they would have found pretty surface things quickly. Had there been any type of investigation, perhaps we would not be here. And granted, that's not particularly productive thinking because now we are here. So should have, could have, would have. That being said, you can't really blame people for not believing in the justice system when we see things like this. We see that basically we're talking about 20 years ago, almost, someone came forward talking about Epstein being a problem. And here we are 20 years in the future with no real answers because nobody bothered to look or because people were told not to look. So between the legal paths, the legal resources failing, between the government covering their asses and covering the asses of God knows who else, the elites silencing this, who are the victims supposed to go to? Like who, if there were a new Epstein right now, who would you go to? Honestly, I would love to know because I was trying to think about it. Who would I go to? Who would I actually think would do something about it? And I gotta say, I didn't come up with many options, not even one really that could really make a difference, that wouldn't be silenced in one way or the other. And I feel for these victims because honestly, this is mind-numbing, I think, for the average person. For someone who went through something life-altering, I can't imagine. Miss Farmer said she did not believe Trump supports justice for victims given his past association with Epstein in the 90s and 2000s. In response, White House Communications Director Stephen Chung said on Monday that President Trump kicked Epstein out of his club for being a creep and called allegations about him recycled old fake news. The rift between Trump and staunch MAGA supporters was sparked by early campaign promises from Trump to declassify information on the case. Other Trump allies have previously called for the release of more information on Epstein. But the Department of Justice recently said there was no evidence that Epstein kept a client list. Trump has said Attorney General Pam Bondi should release whatever she thinks is credible and has defended her handling of the files. He also has questioned the level of interest in the files. Ms. Farmer said that those involved in the case know it's a bit more complex than a client list, with some central questions left unanswered. She also said she was upset by the recent firing of Maureen Comey, who prosecuted both Epstein and Maxwell. I've spoken with other women involved, and I know they shared my sentiment that I felt very wrong at this time, she said. And it was very concerning to us in terms of, why did this happen? It is not clear why the federal prosecutor was removed from her job at the Southern District of New York, and Ms. Comey has said publicly she was not given a reason. A few things motivated her to speak out now, Ms. Farmer said. First, she's extremely disturbed by calls from fringe voices to pardon Maxwell so she can speak in front of Congress about the case. That would be extremely problematic and would be a huge loss for individuals like myself, she said. The second reason is the suicide in April of one of Epstein's most outspoken accusers, Virginia Giuffre. Losses like that, she said, renewed her energy toward better understanding where the justice system fell apart. So here we're also going to be touching on why it is that I was so annoyed by Stephen King's statements. Now, granted, Stephen King is Stephen King. Like, yes, he's a celebrity, he's an author, blah, blah. But he's not in the government, he's not part of the legal process, so it shouldn't really matter, ideally. But the thing is that cases like this, if you want to silence a case, what better tool could you have than celebrities who are like, yeah, the list totally never existed, haha, hee hee, whatever, let's move on. And then you have people like this who are on the other side of the list, let's put it that way. And they're the ones who are going to be dealing with this. So for you, maybe it's easier to sleep at night to think that there's no list and that nothing that nefarious happened and Epstein was just a weirdo and it wasn't that deep or whatever it is people are saying to rationalize this in their heads. How do you do that when you have people like this speaking? And that's why I'm saying now, especially now, people who were victims or people who were in any way related to this, victimized by Epstein, whatever the case may be, should be speaking if they can. These are the people who I think have the best chance at being listened to, because the average Joes like myself or anyone else, I don't really think anyone necessarily cares at that level anyway about what we have to say. And the fact that they're trying to do this in plain sight to me says that the legal system, the government, everyone who has anything to do with this feels extremely comfortable trying to tell us that something we saw, we did not see. So collectively, I'm sorry to break the news to you, that picture that we saw with all the binders and them being like, ooh, Epstein, that never happened. Just a delusion we all collectively had, apparently. The list that was mentioned a billion times in articles, that was also a delusion. We are all seeing things. We all have some kind of mental illness collectively. As much as this is about Epstein, it's also, if we expand how this is being treated into other realms, it very quickly becomes so alarming because here we have evidence, we're being asked to pretend we didn't see the evidence or being told that the evidence doesn't exist. How is this going to go on in the future? Are we going to see police body cam footage of something heinous happening and they're going to be like, actually that didn't happen and the footage is lost? We've already kind of seen that happen. The precedent this is putting in place is alarming to me. The other thing is also, I don't know legally how this works, so maybe it's not possible. But what they're saying about pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell so then she can speak to Congress about what happened, is there really no way around that? Does she have to be pardoned? Is there no little asterisk exclusion we can do for her where she can not be pardoned and give us some information? I really am wondering how it is that they expect us to not see that there are all these imaginary things in the way. And I think that that's why it feels like collectively we're losing our minds, because realistically there's no actual reason why. So even pretending that the list doesn't exist, okay, this list that's been referred to a million times, it doesn't exist. Fine, let's go with that. You're telling me that Epstein did not have any type of traces, no paper trails, no jets picking people up and flying them out no one checking passports, no IDs scanned or sent, nothing from the actual islands, no employees, no one who just saw something weird, no neighbor, nothing. There was no one around, there is no paper trail, there is no digital data, nothing. This guy had a teleport, and all the people he brought there could be invisible until they were on the island. Apparently, that's what we're supposed to believe. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always. I'll catch you guys next time.